สวัสดีเจ้า Pim Kemasingki, City Life Chiang Mai. I'm back and I'm here today with a very, very special guest, Michel Bauwens from Belgium.
Pleased to meet you.
We're going to have a really, really exciting conversation. I first met Michel 10 years ago, exactly actually, when I interviewed him for an article in City Life about the post-capitalist future that you had predicted. And we had another sit down in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, so there's a lot to catch up on. Just to give you a little intro, you can blush if you want, but basically Michel is the co-founder of the peer-to-peer alternative.
Foundation for Peer-to-Peer Alternatives, that's the official name.
What does it do?
Well, we're an observatory of distributed networks, so whenever there's a social situation where people can freely associate with each other, which happens through the internet, everything changes, like mass interactivity. So, the business is changing, politics is changing, and so first of all we look at that and we try to describe what is happening and understand it. And then the second layer is that what people are doing now is creating a lot of shared resources, and we call that commons. So you have knowledge commons, like Wikipedia, and then you have free software. Software commons, and then more and more people actually making things. So you have maker spaces, co-working. So that's what we look at. We look at all these new ways of self-organizing. And so you basically have the geographical world, we're bodies in space. And so we have states and bioregions and cities. But now more and more we have these communities that are organized trans-locally. And we have things like digital nomads, and all of that is changing how we think about society, how we organize society, and the conflict between the virtual and the physical, and how do we solve that, and
so many conflicts.
Many things happening around that.
You called yourself a civic engineer, I believe, last time.
As possible. Can't remember why I said that actually. But,
I know, I'm going to keep quoting him, and he's going to be like, I don't remember.
But let me tell you a little bit about it. So the basic idea is that until, let's say, 30 years ago, knowledge was concentrated in states and institutions, market institutions. And what I'm claiming now is that there's more knowledge in civic society than in these institutions.
Right.
So if you are a small company and you open up to the network, you can have 500 researchers working with you on a common project, and you're going to beat a big company with 400 people, right? So you can when you ally yourself within a network, and then especially an open network, you can mobilize vastly more resources, and that's why Wikipedia won from Britannica, etc., etc. So and why Joe Rogan is more popular than CNN, etc.
That's quite extraordinary. I mean, you used to work for BP, right?
Yes, British Petroleum,
and that's when you got slightly disillusioned with the corporate world and headed.
Yeah, it was a long process. I was an activist when I was young, but kind of young, frustrated, angry. I was a Trotskyist back then, and then the world wasn't really moving in that direction. Then I started working on myself. So I did like 7 years of therapy and 7 years of spirituality in my late 20s and early 30s.
Okay.
And then I felt at some point, I have enough tools now. I want to do something creative, and I created a magazine, made a movie, and 2 startups, and then I went to big companies, basically to save money and quit. That was the idea. Let's work for a big company, get a high salary for a while, save money, and then I took a 2-year sabbatical. That was 2002, 2003. And then I decided to become more like an activist. I wanted to bring something good in the world, and I created the P2P Foundation in 2005.
Yeah. Well, talk about bringing something good into the world. Michel is listed 82nd on a list called the Enrich list, right? Which celebrates the wealth of inspirational individuals. Unlike the Forbes rich list of billionaires, boo, hiss, this lesser-known list spotlights the endeavours of people who look towards the future. Thinkers, economists, philosophers, journalists, sociologists, religious leaders, people whose richness are not defined by their bank balances, which is a bit of a shame, but by what they can offer back to humanity. So he sits beside people like Eleanor Roosevelt, Mahatma Ghandi, Mother Teresa, if you can believe it, and other, less famous but no less impactful individuals. Yeah. So this is a list of people who give back to humanity. And so this is a very significant, list to be on. And another aside I'm showing off for you now is when Bitcoin first launched by, I never remember his name.
Satoshi Nakamoto.
He posted the launch of Bitcoin in 2000 and...
Yeah, he posted it on our forum.
On your forum.
On Ning, which is like a social platform.
Yeah.
The first ever tweet on Bitcoin was by me.
Isn't that amazing? In the world, ever.
And I also make
so
a big mistake because he offered me Bitcoins and I didn't reply to that particular part of the email.
Michel,
so I would have been on the other list. I would have been on the other list.
That's why you're not on the Forbes list.
So unfortunately.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So we talked a lot about what you did. Catch me up about what you've been doing, because we talked a lot about your initiatives, and I can't even begin to talk about it.
Right.
But tell me now what you've been up to the last few years.
So I have a particular view of history, which I call the pulsation of the commons.
Pulsation
of the commons. So basically what you have to see is that markets and states are extractive institutions. They're designed to grow, to compete, to win. And so they will always, not as an exception but as a rule, they will deplete the place where they are.
Of course, yeah.
And of course throughout history that was always like local. Regional, eventually a big empire, but always like really limited, right? So that would then go under, like the Roman Empire would decline and fall, and then some other place would take up and would start over, right?
Yeah.
And whenever that happens, at some point you have a counter reaction. So the people who are linked to the land, who need to eat and to grow, there at some point when this decline is visible, they will react to it. Right? And so there will be some kind of religious revolution, a spiritual revolution. Some poor monk will say, the church is corrupt, we need a new church, and so at those times what is being built are the counter institutions of the commons. And the
Give us an example in history, perhaps.
Okay, so I'll take 16th century Japan.
Okay.
So you have 100 years of civil war between the warlords.
Yeah.
And during that time, as a reaction to it already, there's a Pure Land Buddhism, which is a Buddhist church that established there, and they control about 1/3 of the land, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and they use commons rules, which means like every family can take so much fruit during those days of the week, but not in that season. And these rules are enforced, and so that means that the environment is protected.
By whom? Who enforces?
By the community itself, by the monks, by the institution of these monks.
Right.
Right. Then the shogun wins the civil war, and what he will do is he will disarm the people, destroy the church, and take over the land. But he actually keeps them as an imperial commons, right? And then he will force the nobles that he defeated. A bit like Louis XIV in Versailles, he forces them to go to Kyoto every 2 years, forbidden to use wheels, so they have to pay people. And so for 2 centuries and a half, I think, until the Meiji Reformation, Japan is a land that lives within its means for 2 centuries. So stable population, stable use of matter and energy. But you see, so you have a revolution, the commons, and then a new ruling class takes it over, and it becomes partially the rule for the new epoch. Same, you have a revolutionary Christianity, the poorest of the poor, and they organize themselves, and then at some point the emperors see that the Christians are doing way better in dealing with the plague in the 3rd century, and they say, oh, we need these guys, and then the revolutionary church becomes an imperial church.
Well,
right?
let's go back.
So this is like a dialectic that you can see throughout history, and now we have the world stage of this dialectic, right? So it was local, always local. Every 300 years you have this shift, more or less. Now under capitalism, what we do is because it's a global system, we change the frontier, right? So we deplete one place, then we go to another. We deplete that place, we go to another. And now everything is depleted. So we are using 1.5 times the planet. And if everybody would have the same lifestyle as the West and the middle class in Thailand, we need 5 planets, we don't have them.
No.
So that means we now need to think about the commons as a global institution. right? So I talk about magisteria of the commons.
Magisterial.
Yes. So you have international institutions, IMF, World Bank,
Yeah.
United Nations, and the nations. We have transnational capital,
Yeah.
banks and the
Yeah.
Basel Accords and all of
Yeah.
that. What we are missing is translocal, transnational civic organizations that can protect the commons and the communities that live from the commons.
Well, protect us against the first two, because they're not, those behemoths aren't working.
It's restoring the balance. So I talk about a common-centric society and civilization. That is what we need for the moment. We need to embed the market and embed the state within a broader logic of maintenance of the planet.
Okay, so
Right? Yeah.
when I last talked to you, you were literally just about to fly to China. The Chinese government had invited you to join a think tank
Right.
to think about the future of China, not in 50 years, not in 100 years, but in 500 years. They were going to talk about their resource management,
Yeah,
their
that was
culture.
the Hanwha conference, something like that.
You were also about to go to the Vatican to give them some advice. You were also about to go, you were invited by the Brazilian government.
Ecuador.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Ecuador. But so, since then, there's been a lot of change. Are these people still looking at you for these solutions?
Well, okay, so we'll talk about it in the second half.
We'll get into that bit.
Some things happened politically that was a bit difficult to deal with. But I'm still working with these kinds of people.
You are?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I was talking this week to a meeting in France of 100 maker spaces. I think it was called Fabric City.
Okay.
Right? And my friend of the P2P Foundation is an advisor for the Banque des Territoires, which is the state bank for the regions. And they're going to use maker spaces as the key institution for bioregional development.
Really?
Yeah. And there's
how?
Well, there's 30 million euro put aside to do this, and it's the beginning of the process.
Yeah.
And so the idea is to create a space where you can join the young digital generation with the older craftspeople and recreate local production with high tech and distributed manufacturing on demand in a circular economy using biodegradable material, right? We spend now 3 times as much on transporting stuff than making stuff. So by relocalizing, you save 2/3 of matter energy expense for the same result, right?
It sounds ideal.
Okay, and then what you do, the next step is to connect the local with the translocal. So you have global open design communities which share their knowledge with all these different local people. So from, I hope this is not too complicated, but from economies of scale, which is what we do now, you go to economies of scope, which means doing more with the same. Right? Because when there is material abundance, it doesn't matter. But when there's no more material abundance, then mutualization becomes the key. Like, you can have a neighborhood and now they have 100 cars, right? Well, what if you share 10 cars for the neighborhood with a digital system owned by the people themselves, so like a co-op and association? You can do the same amount of miles with 90% less cars.
You were saying Ghent was doing that.
Ghent is doing that, yeah. Ghent has 2 of them, one for electric cars and one for normal cars.
And it's working?
At the time they had 1,500 people, and I'm sure now it's a few thousand.
And the same with the power grid in Germany, right? Shared solar energy.
60% of renewable energy is done by village co-ops. And my big example is Italy, where you have the Bologna regulation for the maintenance of the commons, which is adopted by 250 Italian cities and has mobilized 1 million people to care for urban commons.
Okay.
Right? Then another thing is you have a network of it's called multi-factories in Europe. So these are craftsmen doing material stuff like textile, wood, plastic, 3D printing. So they look for old factories, at the fringes of the cities, cheap rent.
Yeah.
They have a co-op, everything is open source, and they have something called the Invisible Factory. And that's their commons. This is where they share these 120 groups, share their knowledge, learn from each other, right? And so that's what I call Cosmo-local production. And so to look at it at a world scale, we now have a competition between 3 forces. One is neoliberalism, right? Which is we just continue what we're doing, and it's basically the Davos program, public-private partnerships. The world would be run by combinations of finance and weak states and NGOs, and and they
status quo.
They establish the rules. The alternative to this is national populism, right? Which is let's restore national sovereignty. We don't want so many foreigners. We want industry to come back to our country. And just Hungary, Poland, Trump, Brexit, all of that stuff, right? And so the neoliberals are allied with Anglo-Saxon empire, right?
Right.
It's the Britain, UK, USA, and Europe allied with it. The national populists are allied with the second force, which is Russia, China, right? And these are sovereign. This is a sovereign ideology. It's about states. So they're basically run by their secret services. So business runs Europe and America. The state forces run Russia and China.
America is a bit on the border in some areas politically, but we'll get back to that later.
We'll get back to that. But that's that's a national populist thing that is trying to move things. And then you have the Islamic bloc, which wants the spiritual revolution, right? So these three forces, and then you have those two forces within the West that are fighting for hegemony. What I'm proposing is like a third way, which is instead of using the nation to attract capital, financial capital, which is a losing game for them.
In what way? Can you expand?
Well, because in order to attract capital, you have to be the cheapest possible.
Right.
So you're going to destroy your social system to attract capital.
Environment. Yeah.
Right. So everything, the environmental regulations, social regulations, have been going down.
Yeah.
For 30 years because they're competing for the capital. So if I'm a multinational, I prefer to go to a country where less taxes, cheap labor.
Friendly dictator.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is instead of attracting financial capital, they should start focusing on attracting knowledge capital, right? And so you have the somewheres. These are the people uneducated. They can't leave. They're all working class. They have been deindustrialized.
Have you come up with these terms?
No, that's I think David Goodhart.
Okay.
Then you have the nowheres, and these are people like us. We can travel, we can work remotely, so we're more fit to survive neoliberal society than they are.
Yeah.
Right? And so they have become right wing, basically conservative. They want to conserve whatever they can of the old welfare state. They're not so keen on migration because they're competing directly for certain jobs, etc. And okay, so the nowheres are accused by the somewheres of having no roots and selling out, and so this is the struggle we are having nowadays, right?
Yeah.
I propose a third term, and that's the everywheres, right? So you have these maker spaces, and they create a culture of cooperation. They start making things locally, and then you have these global knowledge hubs. Mm-hmm. But we need people bridging both, right? And this is the digital nomads, right?
What you called the labor aristocracy?
Labor aristocracy, yes, because digital nomads are very skilled people, and they can work remotely, so they can come to Chiang Mai, they can go to Bali. They're everywhere now. This is a huge thing. There's something called nomad list. So even under COVID, Thailand has 14% more digital nomads.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, not in Chiang Mai. I think they've all gone to Phang Nga.
You can't see them. They go to the islands now. They're in the islands.
Yeah.
But this was amazing to me that I saw these statistics that it was still growing, and they're everywhere. They're in Portugal. They're in Medellin. They're.
But they don't have any safety net, right?
No,
These
and that's why I'm working with
vulnerable.
SMART. We mentioned that in the beginning, or maybe it was in a private conversation. So SMART is a new type of labor mutual. Yeah. Right. It's not a union. So it's a union of autonomous workers. So we all have our own clients. We're independent. And we like it that way. Right?
You had 250,000 members a few years ago. Is it still that large?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I join them, I will start invoicing through them. Okay, and that comes on my account. I give them 6%.
Okay.
With the 6%, they prepay me everything immediately. So, in Belgium it's like 3 months plus before you get your money on average, but in some countries 9 months, right? most SMEs go bankrupt because they don't get their money in time.
Yes.
Not because they don't have it. So they give you the money immediately, right? Because they have this pool of money from us. Okay, then there's some kind of algorithm that calculates your wage. So I have a second account, and every month I send money to my second account, and this pays my wage. I pay my taxes. So if you live in Europe, you have full social security, free medicine, free healthcare, paid holidays, unemployment money, everything that a normal worker has, while remaining free. So I really love these guys. This is a very interesting thing. Here's what I want to do, a bit like Estonia. So e-Estonia allows companies in the whole world to register in Estonia, and then they become EU recognized companies, right?
Right.
I want the digital nomads to be able to join SMART in the whole world through a kind of an onion ring, right? Where you join this system, and then it translates to the national chapters, and then you get your protection that way. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking with them, and
that sounds really, really good. I mean, a lot of digital nomads though would be leery perhaps of such a system, because the whole point
you have a lot
is
of
not
libertarians,
to be in a system,
and they have a particular mentality. But I think there's another wing within the blockchain, Bitcoin, nomad world that I work with, and they're like commons-oriented blockchain people. Holochain, Common Stack, Economic Space Agency, and they're all working to create structures, that allow this Cosmo-local production to occur, right? And to create basically guilds, the guilds of the post-capitalist age, right? So
transnational.
I'm a neo-medievalist, so I believe that the kind of structure we're going through are the kind of structures we had. So in the Middle Ages was a.
Can you explain to us? We were talking about the Roman Empire earlier.
The Roman Empire was centralized, okay, and that creates peace inside the borders and war outside the borders. But when that collapsed, Germanic forces, then the Vikings and Islam, and
they ran out of resources as well. Labor, slaves,
exactly. No more gold, no more slaves, and so it kind of sank to a much lower level. And weak kings, empires without power, and so that gave Europe the chance to become a very distributed society. You look at the map of Germany in the 12th century. There's like 80 different countries, right? So everything is about contracts and charters and rights. But throughout this differentiation, you have one institution that shares the knowledge and the ethics, and that's the Catholic Church. Right, and I give the example of the Sister Censors, just very briefly. Right. So this is a new type of monks that criticize the luxury of the older monks, the Benedictines, and they organized in groups of 24. When they reached 48, they split, and they were responsible for 70% of the land reclamation in Western Europe, and 90% of the technological innovations.
In the about 900, you said?
Starting 900 and up, So there was a big revolution in Europe around 975, 1050. It's called the First European Revolution, where you have the monks of Cluny with the people supporting them and the Holy Mary in front, and they start confronting the feudals for their sins, because they're raping people and stealing the gold from the churches, and they win. About 650 charters of the peace of God will be signed in Europe with 3 rules. 1, make love, not war. So the feudals promise to marry each other and not fight. Second, pacification of expansion. Second rule, primogeniture. The oldest son gets everything. Pacification of the family. Don't have to fight for it anymore. Right? That will eventually create a surplus of young men that don't know what to do, and that creates the Crusades. See, so what happens? It happened with Mongolia, happened in Rwanda. So if you equally divide the land, you end up with too many people having too little land, and they can no longer live from the land. And then you have civil war. When you change to primogeniture, you can keep big land estates, right? But that means you have a lot of young men without property.
Yes.
And that's when the Mongolians, when they did that, they became warlike and they started expanding.
Right.
You see? And same thing happened in Europe.
Fascinating.
The second rule was that the poor people could no longer hunt for meat. Right? And this can create an agricultural revolution. So after these three rules are agreed upon in Germany, France, northern Italy, you have an explosion of the high Middle Ages, a tripling of the population of Western Europe. The cities come back, the surplus comes back. So that these 3 centuries of wealth, you know, where working class people had a 5-day week.
Yeah?
Yeah. Sunday, the day of the Lord. Blue Monday, the day of the family. The skeletons of the women were taller than today. Like you look at the cemeteries.
Huh.
So this was a very interesting period which was destroyed in the 14th century. So you know, I can't go in details,
no,
but it's an
let's
interesting,
not have a full history
interesting
lesson,
period.
Fascinating, yeah, absolutely. So, what you're looking at now, I mean, you know.
But what I wanted to say is that the guilds and the cistercians were the people that were traveling around and sharing the knowledge, right? And today that roll out the digital nomads.
Yes.
So these everywheres, which I call rootful rather than rootless, you know, is like you should connect with local people, help them with your skills.
Yeah.
But you can move around, right, and become the people that are the human bridge, the embodied bridge between this global virtual sphere and the local physical sphere. And so, okay, assume you do permaculture. And you know, it's an explosion of permaculture in Europe and everywhere. Like I was working in Ghent and there were like 15 groups already. So you have your feet in the mud, very local. You have your body with your community, but your head is learning from the global. You can learn from every permaculturist in the whole world.
Right.
Right? This is cosmo-localism.
Huh.
It's neither neoliberalism and it's not national populism. It's, I think, the solution. Because the first one is destroying the planet, but the second one can lead to war and xenophobia and all kinds of unpleasant, because it's based on competition. Yeah. You know, so you want to protect your nation, but you're fighting with other nations for scarce resources.
That's not right.
You know, it's not a permanent solution. It's just a reaction to something going wrong.
I mean, this makes sense on so many levels, but is it considered sort of maybe even a luxury of the privileged to be mulling these ideas? Are they rooted enough in reality?
It's both. You know, you have idealists like me, you know, kind of, you know, personality disorder.
Multiple.
But you have a lot of people who just have to do it, right? And so if you see when a system starts going down, which I think it is now, we're in accelerated decline. Yeah. And the only thing, that's what we talk in the second part, that I didn't answer, is that the social collapse precedes the environmental collapse.
Right, okay.
That's what we're seeing. And so the thing is that you have to create pods, right? You have to create templates of the future within the decaying system. So that when, you know, like in Rome, you had 1 million people, and then in the 80,000 people, right? So 90,000 people died or left. Where do they go?
In such a short time, wasn't it?
But that was, you know, one guy called Alaric. He just cut down the water supply. Oh. He didn't want the people there, so he cut the water supply. They had to leave. But at the time there were maybe 200,000 left already. Right. But anyway, so where do these people go? Well, they go to places that have already proven that they can do something different, right? With new rules that solve the issues that you're fleeing. Yeah. So that's the way I'm thinking about it, is, you know, creating seed forms of commons-oriented. Is it too late though? I mean, look at the world, right? I mean, look at where we're at right now. It's too late to save this world, but this is not the end of a world. This is the end of a world. It's not the end of the world, right? In what sense? Well, in the sense that it's a model that is dying, a particular model. And we'll have another model. You know, maybe quite a few people will die in between. That's classic, right? From what? Pandemic? Pandemic, hunger, you know, civil war. Studies about the US, they use these models, and they say 80% chance the US will end up in civil war in the next decade. God, that's terrifying. You know, this is you know, Scandinavian modeling of like social sciences and stuff. And there's 3 different ones. They all come to the same conclusion. Yeah.
Well, the MIT Club of Rome predicted, right, that in 2030 we're going to have the Great Crisis, which is when it would be the end of our resources, fertilizers, energy, whatever. And is that was predicted a decade ago. Are we still
It was in
on
1970s, right? But they've done 4 studies in the meantime. They all confirmed that, this was like 85% right.
So what's going to happen? I mean, talk us through where you think we are now. I mean, we've come through. We're talking earlier about how the 80s were your generation,
right.
a great time.
I'm very pessimistic about the short term. I think we're fragmenting, right? Based on skin color and gender, and everybody hates each other, and there's this kind of authoritarianism growing in Europe. I think we're in bad shape.
Yeah.
But for me, it's one more reason to the other thing, right?
But how did we get here? How did we get into such bad shape? I thought we were,
it's always like that.
The internet arrived. That's a shared commons, shared knowledge. We thought that we were sharing so much, and that didn't help, did it?
So I think that our Western societies are no longer able to create sufficient glue to keep a society together. So the first layer is neoliberalism, meaning everybody's precarious, nobody has fixed jobs, you're afraid of climate change, you're afraid of this. So people can no longer project themselves to the future. I talk to young people.
Yeah.
They have no clue where they're going. Okay?
Has there been another time in the last century that's similar to this?
1930s.
Okay, that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. So the second layer for me is the internet, actually, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know René Girard, scapegoat theory.
Yeah.
So basically we all have needs, but they're socially mediated. That means that we all look at other people to see what we want. And this creates tension in a community, and typically scapegoating is a solution. So you find a third party that you can hate together, you kill them, and then you unify it again.
Regroup, and then...
Yeah, that's wars, civil wars. And René Girard says that we create a religion to streamline this process. So rituals and myth, it's like a so that we don't have to fight together. In reality, we'll sacrifice somebody every year.
Right.
The Purge, the Hunger Games, that's all about that. That's about, and this is, I think, what's happening now.
We're purging.
I see identity politics as basically scapegoating theory on steroids. Everything is hierarchized, and of course the old white male is on top, so we're responsible for all the evil in the world. Before it was the Jews, now it's but it's the same. It's everybody's against everybody. Black women fight white women,
not white,
and Asians are now called white adjacent, so you're also privileged, and there's too many mathematicians, and that's bad because you're discriminating.
I'm white adjacent?
Yeah, you're white adjacent. According to them, you're white adjacent because
so many labels.
Yeah, it's all, and they change all the time.
Which brings me to the fact that I think we'll go to that now.
Yeah. But this is typical for these periods where things are disintegrating, right? There's no binding element.
No, but you've been cancelled, haven't you?
Yeah.
And since I last saw you, when you were being swanned about the Vatican and the world, and now apparently you've been cancelled. Tell us what happened and how we got there.
So here's the detail. I posted a video.
And now apparently you're an alt-right.
Well, that's what they say, but that's not true. But
it's shocking.
Everybody's alt-right.
I'm not.
Yeah. Well, for them, I tell you, and I tell you who them is. But let me tell you just the anecdote how it started. So I had discovered Jordan Peterson, and I was listening to some of his tapes. And there's areas where he's really good at is like Jungian psychoanalysis and comparative mythology, and he has these series, and they're fascinating, really. But he also has very conservative ideas, and I was a lefty, and I still feel a lefty. But the thing was, so I posted a video that said, why is it that young people, when they have trouble, they need to find conservatives because the left is only talking about politics. And I was given examples. I watched Democracy Now! And the Rational National, David Pacman, left YouTube channels, and the only thing they talk about is politics, right? So if you have existential issues, I don't see where to go within that environment. But Jordan Peterson talks about the meaning of life, and and overcoming crisis, and so that was my question. Instead of discussing the question, they said, "Why are you showing this fascist?"
And that's
it was an explosion of hatred. And I checked 8 times what I was saying about him, and it was not there. Like literally fake quotes, and claiming there's a quote in a text and it wasn't there. And so that was a shock to me, because I'm from an older generation of the left where we were actually reading and quoting people and reacting to people. My teacher was like, I had Ernest Mandel as a teacher, great Marxist scholar. So you may like it or not, but these people were serious thinkers, right? Maybe wrong, but
disagree.
But they would not lie about the other side. They would say we disagree with the other side, and they would correctly quote them. And so I felt I was like, with Salman Rushdie and the Muslims who they want to kill him, but nobody has read him. You know what So I thought, what is happening? And so then they wanted to basically shut me down and say, can't speak because you're white, you can't speak because you're male. So we got into this huge conflict, and probably I overreacted.
Was it all online?
All online on a Facebook group.
Right.
And it ended up with them saying I was a white supremacist, a misogynist.
You're Jewish?
I have, my mother was Jewish. I wasn't educated, but,
But
Yeah, but okay, they have these theories and...
What was it called? You said progressive stack? Or something?
Progressive stack is you basically give speech rights on the basis of your immutable characteristics, right? So old white male is -3. Jewish is good, that's +1.
Oh, okay, so you're -2.
Then, body weight is +1.
Oh, so I get a +1?
You get a +1. Lesbian, you get another +1, And so that was...
Who's giving these? Is that a thing?
It started in Occupy, and initially I didn't think anything was wrong with it. But then I've seen the tapes, like in Evergreen State College, where there was an explosion of this thing, and you see how it's really used as a political weapon. It's basically to give you rights based on your color of your skin, right? And that's the change that's happened. So Martin Luther King, he was for color blindness, and the old left that I represent, we were for color blindness. So everybody should be treated equally. Well, they're saying, oh no, that doesn't work. So we need now to treat people based on their color, right? So X% jobs, X% of the budget has to go. And they only look at your color. So poor whites will be discriminated against by a rich color person, right? Because white exploits black,
I
right?
get that.
And they talk about white privilege, they don't talk about wealth privilege, right? And and so the main problem with it is this fragility theory, right? That I can only exist if you validate me. So if you disagree with me, you're endangering my existence, right? And that's how you have this cancel culture, because it's not just a disagreement. You're actually evil. So I became suddenly evil from one day to the other, and then they started a cancel campaign against me. And what that means is that they don't want you to speak anywhere. So if they discover that I'm invited somewhere, they will call them up, they will write them, and they will say, don't invite him, he's toxic, he's outright.
Wow.
And
you're not.
I know, but this is reality, and
Well, how would you term yourself? How did you term yourself?
Well,
what were the words, the labels?
Okay, I am for social justice, so I'm for the redistributional policies, and that places me in the old left.
Okay.
Right? I'm for ecological transformation.
Okay.
That's also traditionally seen as a left thing. Where I've changed, though, is I've not changed, but I'm for. Well, not really, but I was when I was young, and it's like Freud, right? They, right or wrong, they bring something to you in the way you see the world, right? So whether we agree with Freud or not, we are now aware that we have an unconscious mind, so that we can look at ourselves and be self-reflective, and why we're saying what we're saying, and maybe we don't really know why we're saying something, right? With Marx, it's the same. Is you look at class, right? How are people treated? Do they have power? Do they have capital or not? So whether you're Marxist or not, I still think that's very relevant,
Yeah.
right? It's very relevant,
Yeah.
and it's structural, right? We have become more conservative, because of that. Because you have to start thinking, if that is the left, clearly that's not what I am, right? So I'm universalist and egalitarian. I'm still for color blindness.
Yeah.
And all these things are not considered right wing. So they actually, when people lost their job because they read Martin Luther King. So Martin Luther King was for color blindness, right? And these students who are not very well educated, they believe that was a Ku Klux Klan excerpt, right?
Yeah.
And so what is weird now is that even though the professor can say no, but this was Martin Luther King, he still offended them. He still loses his job. So cancel culture is really out to destroy people.
It is, isn't it?
Reputation, income. It has a huge capacity. Yes, I lost 2/3 of my income, and then COVID came. You can imagine what happened to me, right?
I know.
And so suddenly,
it's not right.
Cultural centers, festivals, they won't invite me anymore because I'm toxic, and they're afraid, right? So maybe they don't agree with that, but somebody tells them, careful of this guy. So, okay, they don't even look.
Yeah.
They're not gonna check it. They're just gonna say, we don't want this controversy, right?
To paraphrase,
so it's fear.
Voltaire is, I might fully disagree with you, but I'll defend to the death
I wrote an editorial, and it was called "Voltaire is Dead."
Yeah, right.
Because that's.
And why are we cancelling people we disagree with? Surely we learn more from those we disagree with than people we do agree with. I don't agree with everything you say. It's a long story.
There's several books about it. One is called The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff.
Oh, okay.
And he looks particularly at things like in the 80s around kidnapped children. So there was only 1 or 2 per million, but they put the kidnapped people on every milk carton.
Right.
So typically people would think there was a lot more crime, but in fact there was a lot less crime. So crime fell 90% in 30 years, but coverage of crime increased by 600%.
But yet those milk cartons did save lives,
Yes, a few, but it's like the 80s started all these trends like kids no longer go alone on the street, right? Helicopter parenting. Everything is controlled. I went to the store alone at 5 years old.
I flew to England on my own.
Yeah, it gives you resilience. I met a 16-year-old guy 30 years ago who was climbing the Psilorites in Cyprus. No, not Cyprus, the other island.
Crete?
Crete, yeah. 16 years old, alone on the top of a mountain. That wouldn't be possible right now.
Really?
It's illegal to be alone. Actually, there's laws in the US. And there's a movement called Free Parenting and Wild Childs.
Yeah, I've heard about all that.
They campaigned to abolish these laws because so there's a culture of fear. And then came the internet, where everybody's always judged by other people, and especially the iGen generation. They're the ones
about the coveting and the greed.
But also the fear of the other, right? Of doing something wrong that will start online bullying, right? And the need for young girls to constantly perform. To show themselves in a good light and to filter their image. And these are the youngsters who actually created that culture. So in 2013 they went to the university and they started demanding trigger warnings and safe places. They literally cannot hear another person that has another opinion.
Amazing. You said just now when we're having lunch that censorship is a religion of the liberal now.
Yeah, it's take Joe Rogan. Whatever you like, whatever you think about Joe Rogan, I listen to him regularly. He takes people from different sides of one topic. He's very empathic. He's like you. He draws the best out of people.
From you, that's a compliment.
So he draws the best out of people, and when he disagrees, he says it, but in a friendly way.
Yeah.
And so he invited Dr. Gupta, who is the CNN doctor, the mainstream, and then he invited Dr. Malone, who is the inventor of the mRNA vaccine, one of the main inventors. And these are people with 3 PhDs. They're not stupid, but they have a dissident opinion. Why is this now not possible anymore? I think we need that because he may be wrong, and I think he is wrong about many things, but think about the lab theory. People were persecuted for saying the virus comes from the lab.
Yeah.
It's now the most likely hypothesis. It's accepted by many different people.
Yeah.
Masks, big debate about masks. I thought masks worked, but now more and more studies showing it didn't. Right? Lockdowns. So in other words, those that critiqued were often right.
Well, yeah,
of course, they're also often wrong.
And cancelled.
But the thing is, you cannot eliminate that. You have to have scientific debates, political debates. And so this idea that there's only one ideology that determines what you can say and not, and that people who bring the other side
and you just
should be cancelled, right?
Yeah.
And then they look for what you said 13 years ago, then they use that. So this is all campaigns, right? It's organized, and then they use one thing that doesn't work, they use the other thing, and they up the ante until you're gone.
As a
right?
Sorry, as
so
a journalist,
1,500 people this year have with FIRE. It's a civil rights organization in academia, and they have just this year 1,500 cases of professors who've been cancelled, and 70% or 65% of professors and students say they can no longer speak their mind in academia. Isn't that a word?
That's absolutely terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying.
As a journalist, I've written probably millions of words,
right.
and now I'm going to be speaking millions of words, right. And they're going to be words that are going to be offensive to people.
Yeah, yeah.
And people will be offended by my words. But you've got to take the whole body of work and not just pull.
So one of the things that Jonathan
Haidt
says is that there's something called CBT. What is it? Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
They teach you what to do to avoid trauma.
Right.
So don't exaggerate. Make sure you understand the other. And there's 6 rules, and the woke practice has inverted them systematically. So in other words, it's really designed to create trauma and maintain trauma. So if you're in this movement, you look for trauma and you attack the people who you think attack you, and you traumatize them, and then they will attack you, right? And so this is happening in the culture. This is fragmenting American culture. It's creating civil war-like conditions, and destroying trust and everything.
Yeah.
And so here's the little part where I've become conservative, right? So neoliberal precarity, social media status and envy and greed. I think the third layer is woke itself. The way they're teaching people is destroying lineage. Like you have an empty identity, right? So,
talk about that.
So when you're 4 or 5 year old and they tell you boys and girls don't exist, I think that's wrong. I think they should leave children alone. Maybe a teenager, sure, you have gay people, you have to respect them, they have rights, but why tell a 4 or 5 year old boy, right? And then he's interested in like a toy, a female toy. Oh, he has trans. No, let him be. So I object to this ideologization of education, because they're creating these people. Right? So by the time they get in university, they are already completely in an ideological prison. They haven't learned anything. They don't know history, they don't know geography, and then at university they learn deconstruction, right? And so I think it creates empty selves, and if you have identity issues, you regress. So if you're right-wing, you regress to nation, ethnicity, religion, you become fundamentalist. But if you're this other kind, who am I? Well, I look like you, so let's all the black people be together and all the women be together, and then it just fragments further and further in these micro tribes, and everybody is fighting the other, in zero-sum games. So I win, but you must lose so that I can win.
But can I be contentious a bit here? Because when we last talked. Many years ago, you were talking about how nationalism and nation patriotism, boundaries, that's all going to end, and people like digital nomads will find their own tribes because tribes won't be with borders. So therefore, is it not possible that this seismic change we're going through right now, where it's just us fragmenting? As it's a natural way that we're now we're fragmenting from the past, we're shifting, we're finding small tribes, and of course it doesn't make sense. There's how many pronouns now that are
900 something.
There we go. But would this not just be something that will just eventually find its way back? That it did have to happen because the status quo was so messed
I
up.
fully agree. So what I discovered is, transitions are never soft. So,
Yeah.
For the rain to become snow,
Yeah.
it has to disintegrate and then it recrystallizes, right? So that happens at every end of a period, of an epoch, and a system.
And you think we're now at an
We're
end
now
of
in it.
epoch?
We're now in an so what I didn't anticipate, so I thought the ecological issues would create political and social issues. What I see now is that the social disintegration precedes the other disintegrations. And unfortunately it makes us less able to cope with it, right? But here's the thing, those people won't survive. You need community, and so that's why I think that focusing on history, on creating lineage, rooting yourselves in tradition,
which is the whole right.
And that's a conservative reaction that I have now. So that that I have to agree with my critics.
Family.
That at least, I have a family with 4 children and 2 children with me, and all these things have become a lot more important now than before. And you look at the end of the Roman Empire, what do you see? Stoicism, Epicureanism, Christianity. They're all coping philosophy, right? They're not utopian. Epicureans say, retreat to your friends in the garden. Stoicism says, don't be disturbed by anything that happens around you.
Yeah.
Christianity says, don't bother about this world, focus on the other one, right? So this is the era we're in. So we're no longer into socialist utopias and the world is going to be a better place. No, now it's about how to survive in the chaos, right? But I still think, and this is why I'm still committed to my work, is we need still, more than ever, to work on these seed forms that are receptacles for the people who have to go outside. Because every transition is also marked by exodus, right? The slaves leave the city, become serfs. The serfs leave the countryside, becomes proletarians. And now the salaried workers become precarious, right? The slaveholders become landowners in the feudal system. The landowners become bourgeois. And now, they're, I think, cognitive capitalists or whatever you want to call them, the Googles and stuff. So there's these shifts between the managerial class and the productive class. And they disintegrate, but then they reform in some other form.
But yet, in this time around, we don't have that luxury because this is now existential because of the scale.
That's where the Cosmo-local thing comes in. We need now to think Cosmo-local, so that we have to have 2 dimensions in everything we do. So local is embedded, it's scarce, it's, you need to find the food and energy around you, because you're not sure it's going to come from somewhere else. But knowledge, you have to learn from everybody, right? And we have the internet. That's
but it hasn't helped.
And then we need these intermediaries. So that, I think we talked about it, the everywheres, right?
Yes.
So I see this as a new kind of transnational guilds of people committed to this transition. That I still want to do that.
It's interesting because you also criticized the language of woke earlier, but yet you have a lot of labels for a lot of
but it's
things.
So there's 2 reasons to create new words. One is elitism, right? I'm going to use a different language, and it creates barriers and keeps us.
You see, and I think your language is rather,
it is, but it's
not easily accessible.
No, but it's because if you do something new, and the old words don't fit, you need to find the right words.
You just gave woke movement their justification.
No, but what they're doing is different. So what they're doing is overturning the same words, right? So anti-racist used to mean I'm against judging people based on their race.
That's true.
And I want people to judge on their character. Now this is racist. And
like
anti-racism,
Antifa,
exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Anti-fascism, they burned for $2 billion of buildings in 2020.
I know,
right?
It's ridiculous.
So, and they burn books and they close libraries and they have the same.
I know.
So this is the problem: is this inversion of words. Where, for example, you say systemic racism. What it used to mean structural racism, right? So it wasn't about bad people.
Itself.
It was a system. So if you talk about patriarchy, it's your mother, the female, is teaching a man to be patriarchal.
Yeah.
So women are just as part of the system as males,
yeah.
right? So patriarchy is the bad thing. It's not the male.
Not the male, yeah.
The same with, you know, with Marxism, is the class. It's not a person. It's a structure, right? And what they've done is they essentialize this to your color of your skin. So white, essentialized, right?
Essentialized.
So whiteness, every white person is racist. And if you're quiet or critique it, that's a proof that you're racist, right? If you cry, it's not because you're suffering, it's because you're manipulating, right?
Oh.
So there's nothing I can say as a white man that is legitimate to them, because I'm not a person. I'm a member of my class, right? And this is why when black people disagree with them, they say you're not black, because it's, you know, it's some kind of platonic essence.
So but you still need to get heard. I mean, I think your opinions need to get heard. So how do you navigate this, you know?
It's a big problem. And so that's the paradox, is they force people like me to talk more to centrist and moderate and even right-wing people, because they cut down your voice, right? When I go to a progressive thing, someone will say I'm racist, don't listen to it.
Yeah.
So it becomes a problem. So I have to talk somewhere else.
Yeah, you were saying the cognitive elite have become disassociated with
I think
reality.
that my generation, we had intellectuals that, you know, we wanted to liberate everyone, and so we were at the service of the working class. And you had, for example, the Christians and the socialists, right? Their intellectuals were working with the people. Now these people, they talk about deplorables, right? They're socially racist, actually. They, like the truckers in Canada, they hate them, right? They're the working class people who are, you know, don't want the vaccine mandates. And, you know, I'm sure some of them, or even a lot of them, are right-wing now. But why does that, you know, I don't want to demonize them. So, you know, I'm sure it's going to end, but it's going to end badly, because scapegoating mechanisms end badly.
Well, you shared that video the other day on your channel by Kristen, what's her name, Crystal Bell or something, the woman, the commentator.
Yeah. So it's called Breaking Points.
Yeah.
It's the best political program in the US.
I was so impressed.
Sagar and Crystal.
Yeah.
She's a left-wing woman, and he's a more conservative Indian guy. And I can't remember what.
No, but I was
shared,
fascinated by the fact that she was talking about how we're so busy demonizing one another that what the hell, the people we should be demonizing.
It's the best speech I heard in many years, where she's really saying that.
We'll share it.
Like, you know, what you're doing is having everybody fight everybody else instead of looking for commonality, right? So, do you disagree with the truckers, yes or no, about the issue of the mandates? You disagree, it's fine. But, you know, you are delegitimizing them because they're racist, misogynist, and it's not even true. Or maybe, you know, one or two of them, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are, for sure.
Yeah.
But
and, you know, you walk around with a Nazi flag, you really should be told off.
But it's one person.
I know.
One person with a Nazi flag, one son with a comfort, they both stopped them.
Oh, did they? Okay.
And the guy, you know, he didn't want to show his face, and so, you know, it's...
Yeah. But the point was fascinating in that, you know, we have a common enemy right now are those big companies, BP, etc., who affecting policies, buying politicians, and raping the earth.
And it's really systemic,
we're
right?
Not even bothering about that.
It's not the CAO of BP. Anybody who would be CAO would have to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So we're fighting against the rules and systems and protocols, right? We're not fighting evil people.
Yeah.
Everybody is good and evil, a mixture. Yeah. And so this idea, so there's an author called Eric Voegelin, and he talks about Gnostic political movements. Okay, this is interesting. Give me 5 minutes.
Please.
Okay. So, in the beginning of history, we have a circular vision of history, right? The eternal return. Every traditional society believed that, you know, there's cycles.
Okay.
Okay. Then Zoroaster.
Right.
He's the first one to say, no, there is time. There's a beginning and an end, right? And that influences the Jews who were exiled to Babylon, where they learned this and they changed their own. And so that introduces in European civilization the idea of St. Augustine, you know, there's beginning and then the salvation at the end of history, right? A line in history.
Okay.
Around this period of the 10th, 11th century, you have a guy, Joachim de Fiore, and he's the first one who says, no, there is the age of the Father, the Old Testament, the age of the Son, love and the Church, and then the age of the Holy Spirit, where we no longer need the Church and everybody will live brotherly.
Oh, that's nice.
On earth, right? So Voegeling says, this is a difficult word, the immanentization of the eschaton. In other words, what he has done is taken the theology, but he's put it on earth, right? So you're not going to be saved by going to heaven. We're going to make earth a better place. So this is Gnosticism. There's good and evil on earth, and we need to fight the bad people to create a good society. That gives the Reformation and the Puritans and Civil War, and that gives Marxism and all the other theories which say we're going towards utopia here on earth, right? And the woke is another iteration of this. Good and evil, good and bad people.
Wow.
And they're the good people. Yeah. And you disagree with them, you're bad people, you need to be destroyed, because it's you who make the world a bad place. And this has never ended well.
No.
Whether it's the Gulag or the Holocaust.
No, you're right.
So, you know, of course they're soft, they're just destroying people's lives and reputations.
Yeah.
But, you know, do you think it's going to stop there? I don't think so. This is a spiral. Yeah. You know, you always want to be more pure and pure and pure. Yeah. And when you admit all your enemies are outside, then you start looking in, right? They start fighting each other.
Right. Gosh, that sounds a bit depressing. Well, can we jump completely to another topic? But I still think it's something. I mean, we mentioned Bitcoin right at the beginning. So, you know, this was the great hope of, you know, the technology of blockchain. But yet there's the energy issue that we all get really upset about, and obviously the gambling aspect of it and how it's again it's run or the people at the top of it tend to be white men in their 30s, 40s, whatever. So tell me your opinion of this technology.
Well, okay, so I think Bitcoin, despite all these critiques that I share, is very important because it was the first socially sovereign money system that worked at scale. Okay, so we have 6,000 complementary currencies, but they're very small and they're local and they work. You know, you need a lot of time to engage with them. Yeah. So Bitcoin has the advantage of working at a global scale. I don't think it's a good currency. I think it all the things you say, it uses too much energy and it's very unequal. But I think it's good to have because, you know, like Assange, they cut his money supply, they use Bitcoin. The truckers, GoFundMe, cut their money supply, they use Bitcoin. So it's like a protection for minorities and activists against, you know, state
tyranny
and private tyranny, right? Okay. And it's based on social legitimacy, right? The people as a community believe in the algorithm. But I think it's badly designed, but I think it was the first one. So we need currencies that are thermodynamically intelligent. So Fishcoin is a money that knows how many fish can be fished every year without destroying the reproduction of the fish, right? Mutual credit currencies about recognizing contributions in a network, energy currencies. So all this can be done now with cryptocurrencies, but they have to be designed in a common-centric way, and most of them are designed in a libertarian way. And the mistake of libertarians, they think, is everybody's equal, everybody will stay equal. No. Any system that's based on competition for a scarce resource creates iterative games that concentrate always. So oligarchy is just a consequence of any distributed network that doesn't have counter mechanisms, right? So in the Middle Ages, for example, in Dubrovnik, if you became a mayor, they actually imprison you because they wanted to know who is talking to you, like against lobbyists.
Oh, wow.
Right? In Italian cities,
highly extreme.
In the Middle Ages, the merchants were forced to sell grain at a fixed price until 5 o'clock so that everybody had food. And then a masked man who came from another city, if he saw any merchant overcharging, he could cut his head off. Okay, I'm not saying
extreme.
slightly extreme, but what I'm saying is you need counter protocols, anti-oligarchic protocols.
Yeah.
And they don't want to do that. They think that if everybody is equal, no, you can see Bitcoin is already more equal now than any other currency.
Yeah.
You know, it's about 12 people that hold, I don't know, like 70% of the money. I forgot the figures, but it's highly concentrated.
Yeah.
Okay, the blockchain, I think, is also very important because it's about accounting. Okay, accounting created the state. So you have Mesopotamia, the first city-states, and the temples are measuring the grain that comes in and out. That's when they invented accounting. You see?
One of the first ledgers was there, wasn't it?
Before even writing.
BC.
Writing came 1,000 years later.
Yeah.
So writing was invented to count.
Yeah.
Right? Then in the, I don't know, 13th, 14th century, an Italian monk starts developing double accounting, inspired by the Arabs, but he improves it and changes it.
Yeah.
And that creates capitalism, right? You have an entity, comes in, goes out, and you know if you have profit or not. But these are narcissistic accounting systems, right? They don't tell you anything about the ecosystem. Now with the blockchain, we can have open ecosystems where everybody can see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So we can create shared supply chains, shared accounting systems, and you know, we can do very interesting things with that. So I'm critical, but I'm also thinking these are the tools for the next stage of civilization.
But the energy issue has got to be addressed.
I think it's already addressed. So you have post-blockchain ledgers now that like 30 times more energy efficient than the blockchain.
Okay.
There's Cardano, there's like 6 or 7 of them.
Right.
And holochain is like zero energy.
Oh.
Because they changed the philosophy. So the blockchain of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which is a layer on top of that, right? That is based on the idea of a world computer.
Okay.
Right? One ring to rule them all. So every transaction has to be visible by the whole world. Okay, that makes it exponential.
Right.
Because every transaction has to be checked. Holochain says, no, that's not what we need. We need a system where everybody can make his own ledger. Doesn't require anything, but it's interoperable with any other ledger that wishes to connect to them.
Oh gosh.
So you have no world computer. It's a completely peer-to-peer distributed system, right? Zero energy use, like nothing.
But they're using the energy of every peer to the other peer.
No, they use the energy of the computer, but they don't use any energy for mining or verification.
Oh, okay. Oh, then that was the heavy bit.
Yeah, that's the heavy bit.
Right. Gosh, okay, wow. Well, I'm going to come to my readers' questions next, but before we get to that, can you just, I mean, it's been obviously fascinating. I could sit here and talk to you all day, but you've got to leave, so I'm blaming you now. But so tell us what's next, and let's have a bit of a positive, let's not end on a sad note. You know, where do you think we can go? Where's the future?
Well, yeah, I'm a lot less optimistic than I was in 2018 because...
Oh God, and you weren't greatly optimistic then. But go on.
So, you know, I think people need to really think about, like, where does my food come from? Where does the energy come from? You know, and start mapping where can I learn from? And so basically start thinking that what you see today is not eternal. And
wow,
and that, you know, mutualization is a very important way to survive, right? To use less with more people.
But is that, I mean, at the end of the day, me using a plastic bag or not, and then there's BP spilling oils everywhere and doing all the naughty bits.
Yes,
I mean,
I know, but you know,
change?
there's a balance of power, and right now it's hard to see how to change it.
Yeah.
Right. So we can complain about it, or we can say down with capitalism. Maybe it's good for therapy, but I don't think, you know, after 200 years of shouting, it's still there.
It's still there. So you don't think...
So, no, I think these systems are unsustainable in the long run. And so we need to really think seriously about, but not just making alternatives, but interconnecting them and owning them, right? So this is a shift now. So there's been an exponential growth of urban commons. So in Ghent, I did a study for the mayor.
Yeah.
There were 50 in 2008 and 500 2016.
Okay. Is that not a luxury of a country like yours? It's small, it's liberal,
well,
it's open-minded.
it's been replicated in Latin America.
Has it?
I don't know about Asia, but it's been replicated in many places.
But
so this is happening in cities.
You were proposing to have a greater Mekong sub-region sort of, system at one point, weren't you?
Yeah. I haven't really done anything about it because
we're not ready.
I haven't been able to regenerate any serious interest here.
No, I don't think
But
we're
the
ready.
Chinese, that's different, right? In China, in 2013 they changed, right? So if you look at the history of China, so there's a revolution in 49, there's Maoism first, and they do a few horrible things, but they also
just a few.
Yeah, but longevity, like life expectancy goes up, universal literacy.
Apart from the ones who died.
Apart from the ones who died.
60 million.
But they grew like 3 times faster than the West. Okay, so then the Soviet Union collapses, and then basically he says, okay, we need more capitalism to survive, and so you have this revolution in China around the markets and stuff. But they actually never gave up power, right? So 70% of the industry is owned by the state. The land is owned by the villages. No private land ownership in China. It's only leasing. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
And they have, a Masonic lodge, the Communist Party, that manages the country in a strategic way. Then in 2013, Xi Jinping comes on power, and he looks at the West and he says the West is going wrong. So Deng reacted to the Soviet Union, and Xi Jinping reacted to decline of the West.
Yeah.
Right? And so what they're doing is they're retaking control of the market. Cut down all the leaders of big tech. 3 hours of internet for young people. Completely shut down the private tutoring business. And so so they're doing is around 2 priorities: ecological civilization and common prosperity. They're sending out 4 people to every village where there's still poor people. And so this capacity of mobilization, nobody else in the world has that, right? No. So you can critique, and I critique it. I wouldn't like to live in a system like that. But it's doing the right thing, even maybe in the wrong way. You see what I'm trying to say?
I know, it's so tough, isn't it?
Because we are run by private groups.
Yeah.
Our democracy is a theater.
And that's where the cancel culture bullshit needs to end, because
it makes it even worse,
nuances,
right? So we can't do
nothing.
We are in a paralysis. And China is, for example, doing biophysical accounting. Like they're not counting money; they're counting matter and energy flowing into these provinces. You know what they're doing? Amazing. Proudhon is the major anarchist thinker of the 19th century. There's one province that is using the ideology of Proudhon to organize the whole market system. It means capital for everyone, not just for the elite. Everybody who wants to do business can have a loan.
But it's not realistic, because there's no other country that could possibly have the China model. So again, where's the optimism? I'm trying to get to the optimism.
Well, the optimism for me is I don't call it optimism. What we have to do is building the premises of Cosmo-local future, and find the right people in government who want to support this, right?
And keep having conversations.
Did I tell you about France? No. Okay. I spoke last week. I gave the end keynote. So this is 100 maker spaces. I think I mentioned.
I don't know if we talked about it here. Oh, we did. We did.
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
So, and then Italy. I think I mentioned Italy. So things are happening.
Things are happening.
And that's the problem. Nobody talks about it. Everybody talks about the conflicts.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that.
Right? And nobody knows. And that's what I'm doing with the P2P Foundation. I'm monitoring and telling people this is happening there. And then so we have 22,000 articles that were watched 150 million times.
Wow.
And so people can learn from what works, what doesn't work, what is happening in other countries, and then then you can share the models and
well, this is amazing.
there's only so much you can do as
well, you do so much. Hence the 82nd on the enriched list. My God, that's
yeah, I don't think I would get on the list today.
Well, you're on it, so tough. Well, we just got a few questions from our readers who sent in just to end it all, okay? So first one, to want collectivization is to aspire to mediocrity. I suppose that's fine if you consider yourself less than average.
Yeah, I think it's a question of balance, right? So we had equality, fraternity, liberty. If you focus too much on one, you destroy the other. So if you want equality at every price, you will destroy liberty. If you want liberty at every price, you destroy equality. And especially fraternity, that's what we're missing, right?
Yeah.
So I think the common is a lot about fraternity. It's about creating communities that have a shared social object,
right?
Like making a good operating system, making a sustainable car, right? And that creates an additional layer of identity. And so to continue my critique on the woke, when you destroy every other identity, that's not good. You have to go pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional, right? You're a child, you're wild, then you learn from your parents, your school and your peers how to behave in society.
We change, we evolve.
And then only can you go to the next stage and become an independent individual. And what they're doing is, so they're not learning anything in high school, and then they're being deconstructed when they go to university. It's a catastrophe. It's a total catastrophe. And so
that's what got you
that's
cancelled.
what the collective, but that's what the collective is still important, and these libertarians don't understand that, because they went through the phase and they're very autonomous. But you have to understand that there has to be some kind of collective that allows you to get there, right? And so it's a question of balance. Right. I'm not a collectivist, I'm not an individualist. The commons is based on free association, right? It's not based on coercion. But I still think we need a state because we live together in a territory. And are we going to drive left or right?
Shared resource. Somebody
needs to make the decision. Democratically is the best. But that is not going to disappear, and that's where I think. And again, I'm for the meritocracy, and I agree that what was now happening in the U.S. is very bad. Where they are basically abandoning exams and testing and just to have equal outcome, right?
No,
And I think equal
I'm
outcome is.
I'm offended that you're offended. It just goes on in a circle of offense.
And this is important. So the liberals say equal opportunity, the classic liberals. So give everybody the chance to become good. And the socialists said, yeah, but everybody doesn't have the same chance. So we need public education, we need free healthcare so that everybody has the same chance, right? So that's building the infrastructure for having equal opportunity. And the woke are saying, no, we want the end game. Everybody has to arrive at the same time, right? So, there's too many Asians that study hard. Well, sorry, Asians, you can't do that. So we'll lower the entrance exam, right? And that's a very bad idea, because that means
you're bringing the common average down.
Exactly.
Rather than
and so I sympathize with this question, because that's probably what he means.
Probably.
Or she means.
But okay, here's another one. What are the best things the average Joe can do to instigate change away from flow-up, hyper-capitalistic systems, especially in the undemocratic countries?
Well, I would say, just doing practical things around you, your family, your friends, your community, and is there a way to get organic food in a better way than today? Can we do more renewables? And just do it. And try to own it, right? Try to. So this is a good example. The Park Slope Food Co-op in Brooklyn is the most famous food co-op in the world. They started it. So if you become a member, you have to work like 1 day a month, and that allows them not to hire so many people, and so the food is 30% cheaper. Okay. And I'm a lifetime member of the Madison, Wisconsin Food Co-op, because I live there.
Okay.
What they said is if we didn't own the place, we would have to have left long time ago because of gentrification and real estate speculation, right? So you have to own the thing. So we're done with the hippie stuff. No, we need to own. Right? So there's a big movement in Holland They want to buy 64,000 acres of land, hire the farmers with an ecological contract, and make organic food 100%. This is what we need to do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Last question. How has the pandemic affected, well, pretty much the world, everything? How has this shifted?
Well, it's accelerated.
I know it's a huge question.
Yeah, it's accelerated.
We only have a few minutes.
It's an accelerator, right? It's a catalyst. So everything that was going wrong before is going wrong faster now. And especially it has created this free-floating anxiety, which has been documented in the 1930s in Germany. So this is very bad. It's the breeding ground of fascism, right? When people have nothing to hang on to, they will end up asking a leader to do it for them. Like, I need protection. I can't protect myself. Who's going to protect me?
Terrifying.
And that used to be a right-wing thing, and now it's both.
I can't name one person I would trust to protect me. Well, in the political sphere.
Yeah, but you guys like Orban and yeah.
So it's an accelerator.
It's an accelerator, and I think this is gonna. The other thing is gonna happen is that we had the great, what was it called? Where money was free flowing. They've been printing like trillions and trillions of dollars.
Okay.
Quantitative easing, that's the word I was looking. So this is finished. So now they're gonna tighten everything. So expect a huge austerity program. They're gonna hit the poor people like in a major way.
They've already been hit in a major way. How much more hitting can we do?
It was always slow, and I think that will accelerate. Yeah. So expect huge social protests.
Right. Let's end on a happy note. one happy thing to say to our audience.
Well, no, but the thing is, when you see things go wrong, it is also you shouldn't wish it, right? I'm not saying I wish it, but it does waken people up to that we need to do something different, and that's the silver line.
Yeah.
Is that more people will first talk, think, read, and eventually they will do. Right?
Right. Well, thank you so much, Michel Bauwens. This was just amazing. The only person who was bored was Tiggy.
It was 1 hour of mansplaining that was like...
It was. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.